Hi, and welcome back to the Be Positive channel. I'm Kimberly Black, and today I have the privilege of interviewing a registered social worker.
Correct.
Right, Liz Evans. Not only is Liz a registered social worker, she's also a personal friend of mine. And Liz and I actually met, probably 16 years ago, over 15 years ago, when we were both working as servers at Eastside Mario's.
Correct.
Yeah, that was actually good times. I'm not gonna lie. And at that time, we kind of shared another thing. We were both attending university as mature students.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yes.
University of Toronto. So,
I
welcome.
followed your lead.
Yeah, crazy. So, you have a psychology degree?
I do. I have a Bachelor of Science in Psychology. I majored in Health Studies and Psych, and I also have a specialist in Mental Health and Addictions.
Oh, that's amazing. And it's funny because when you were enrolled in those courses, I don't know, we would talk about the courses we were taking. We both really were interested in psychology. But did you ever expect that your education would sort of set you up for the work that you do today?
Absolutely not. I actually had no idea what I was doing. I knew I wanted to do something in the health field. I knew I wanted to do something in psychology. I grew up with a mother involved in the community service, social services field, always giving back in foster care and developmental services. So I kind of came from that background. I was a little late to school. Mature sounds nicer, but I was a little later to school, just got a little distracted. But it was always there. And I actually literally fell into it. Second year, we had to pick our major, and I was going for Tim's. And I believe the lieutenant general, I can't remember his name especially, but he was giving a talk in the lunch hall and talked about his experiences with mental health and the system. And at that time, they were announcing a new mental health specialist program for mental health and addictions. And I was just going for a tea, and I came out with a major. And that's literally the story. I wish I could say it was more academic than that.
I think I actually remember that, and I think some of the courses that you had to take, it wasn't even an option for me because you had some prerequisites that I didn't have.
Right. Because I was kind of moving in a direction that I didn't know where I was going, and then divine intervention, and I already had the prereq, so it was an easy shift for me. So I kind of just kept going, and that's
well, it's very impressive because I have to say I started at least a year before Liz, and she finished before me because that's how she rolls.
Well, I first of all, I was broke, and I wanted the bleeding financially to stop.
Yes,
the quicker the better, and start making some money. So that was a lot of incentive for me to kind of power through summers and
whatever.
Get it done.
It's just you're a bit of a crazy workhorse person.
That is true.
And the thing that was really interesting is that not only were you basically taking on a full-time course load, you were also working full-time, and you're a mother of several children. Several children.
Might be a gaggle.
How did you navigate your way through that? Because some that are watching might be thinking, "Oh, I wouldn't mind going back to school, but I don't have the time." How did you navigate your schedule?
I think I look back on that and I'm like, oh my goodness, it didn't feel that onerous at the time. But I think, first of all, I got lucky. So when I say I was working, I had a contract with a developmentally challenged girl and was able to work with her in my home or in the community. So that allowed me to make an income while doing my schoolwork. So that I was kind of blessed with. And then I had the luxury of working part-time at Eastside's. And then it was just family. My family is integral. I'm one of a gaggle of 6.
Yes.
And we've always helped each other. We all have lots of children and lots of things going on. So I would say family in that community support to help each other. That was kind of normal for us. So.
Well, I've since knowing you, that's something I've come to know about you, that you have a really close family.
Correct.
And that, I mean, you can't, we take it for granted if you have it. I mean, I certainly talk about that with my husband. I always regularly tell him how lucky he is to have two parents that are still together and that support him no matter what, that are still in his life on a regular basis. And I know that's what you have. And not just, you know, a mom, you've got siblings and nieces and nephews and grandchildren, and can you believe she's a grandmother? But she is, so what can you it's really truly amazing. And it's interesting that you ended up in a helping profession, helping youth in the community. And, you know, like, knowing what I know about you, I can't think of a better person to do that. But recently you experienced a tragedy that is really every parent's worst nightmare. And I don't know if are you willing to share a little bit about what you've experienced recently?
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to say I had no interest in working with youth or children, which is quite odd because I have 4 of my own. Wow. But I've always known I was never going to be a teacher. I was never going to work with small children. That just wasn't kind of my skill set. And I, like most things in my life, I bumbled into youth. Fresh out of university, I got a position at an agency that was strictly youth. And I remember in the interview, and they said, what do you know about youth and what have you done with youth? And I said, I know that I don't like them. And apparently they thought that was funny, and they gave me the job based on 0 experience with youth, and really I was joking, but I really was like, I don't think I like youth. I guess, again, intervention. So I ended up working at this great agency that opened my eyes to the needs of this population. And then it was a contract, so I ended up leaving there and working with adults. And would you know it, I was like, I don't like adults. I like youth. I was meant to work with youth. And so I ended up going to a position that I'm in now where I work with youth. And I'm supposed to be there. I like that population.
Excellent.
Back to me, I have 4 children. I have 2 girls, 2 boys. And my oldest son, he would be 25. He would have been 25 this July. Struggled with lots of kind of learning difficulties and mental health from a young age. We were always kind of struggling with him and school and friends, and got into substances at a pretty young age. I would say around 12 to 13, unbeknownst to us, but learning through the process. And you do all the things you do, and I have insight, obviously, into this issue. So even with my kind of background, ability and information and knowledge, it was awful. It was a nightmare, and felt like an unstoppable train that you just were along for the ride of. And you do all the things. You do the tough love, and you do the yes and the no, and the appointments, and all of those things, and you do what you need to do. And unfortunately, he passed away February 27th, 2020, of an overdose after many, many years. As I said, the last 2 years were pretty intensive, trying to get him support and saying no, having to put boundaries up, regardless of knowing how unwell he was. And yeah, he ended up passing away at the end of that journey.
So dealing with the loss of a child has to be the most stressful thing a human being can possibly endure. I can't honestly think of something more challenging, and maybe that's something that you have a different perspective on now. But I've always known you to be a really strong and resilient person, I think I was even a little bit afraid of her at one time when we were first working together.
She's not the first person to say that.
But even in a situation like with the loss of a child, how does a strong, resilient person like yourself carry on from that? How do you pick yourself up, and how long did it take you to pick yourself up from that?
I think doing what I do for a living was almost a catch-22 in this situation. So you have the intellectual academic insight as to the logical course of the outcome of this lifestyle. And then you've got the emotional investment that this is your child. So it was a bit of a catch-22 around of my head was telling me like, this can't possibly end well. And then the emotional tie of, well, it has to end well because that's my kid. So we're going to have to figure it out and we have to be hopeful. Because of the journey, I think that the last 2 years were preparing for the aftermath. And so while I look back as 2018, 2019 as a complete and utter, it was a nightmare. It was really bad. But when you deal with something that's that bad, then when something really bad happens, you almost have an inadvertent resilience because you've lived through that terrible year to 2 years. So it's not the same. So that there's that bad, there's the pre-bad, and then there's the post-bad. They're not the same, but I think that it informed and helped to prepare, okay, so we've survived that, so now we have to be able to survive this. I don't know if that makes sense, but I feel like that was kind of my rationale. And in some ways, the pre-nightmare, it has been more difficult than the post.
That's actually really interesting because I attended the service in 2020, and I was really impressed with how strong you were speaking about it, and kind of your perspective was very insightful and I think healing in some ways for you, like as a way to cope with what you just lost. He wasn't in pain anymore. And that's I can't imagine as a mom even having to contemplate these things, but it was a way for you to kind of explain to the people that were there, I miss my son, but he's not in pain anymore, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, again, because of that journey and seeing the amount of pain he was in and the struggle, as a parent, like, you just want your kid to be healthy. And I've had this conversation with his father around, if we could wave a magic wand, and just bring him back, right, tomorrow, would we do that? Like, would that be in his best interest to do that? And we've gone back and forth. We have this conversation every time one of us is having a hard time. We ask each other this question because there's days when you're just like, man, like, I just need a minute with him.
Yeah.
And then when you, and we check each other and we'll say, like, if you could wave a wand, like, that last year and a half, would you bring him back to that? Like, nothing changes. We're going to bring him back to that day, that time, that space. Are we going to bring him back to that? And as a parent, it's really hard to say yes. Yeah. Which then informs the post kind of okay, well, then we have to accept that, he wasn't thriving here. And I don't know what that means. Everyone's got whoever they believe in or whatever, but I know that as a fact. He was not thriving here. I don't know what it would have taken for him to thrive here. I don't think that we had the capacity to make him thrive here. I don't feel any regrets or guilt about shoulda, woulda, couldas. Yeah. I'm very grateful that I don't have that regret. His dad and I fought to the end of the earth for that kid. Yes, he did. Yeah. So I think I'm really proud of both of us of how we handled that last part. But it's the reality of the actual truth that he wasn't thriving here. Do we want that for him? No.
No, it's like, if someone is suffering in pain with an illness, you want that suffering to stop. You don't want them to stop, but you want the suffering to
Absolutely.
stop. So in this regard, okay, maybe he wasn't in physical pain from a disease, or an illness of some kind, but he was in pain, and there's many different kinds of pain. So the knowing that he's no longer in that pain anymore, I don't know if that's your anchor,
Right.
that you. And I really love how you and his father really came together and were each other's like leaning posts.
Absolutely.
You took turns being the leaning post.
And the funny thing about that is, for many years after we split, that was a bone of contention, because I fell into the bad cop and he fell into the good cop, and that was a source of a lot of issues for us with being on the same page and going through this. And then when we the last year and a half, it was actually a good thing, because we could bounce off my skills and his skills, and we kind of wrapped around him with both. So something that was causing an issue before turned out to be really positive, I think, come the end. Like, we needed what each of us brought to the table, right? Because I could come in hot and really bossy and initially, and he would be more softer and have a different perspective, and we needed both, to be quite honest, with not either or.
I think that is really commendable, and I'm guessing even now there's you are each other's strength. Just you're kind of like the two people, the two closest to him, that will always help you to have a memory, a spark.
Yes.
Like he's always alive, because the two of you keep that memory going, and that's quite profound and healing, I guess. And I I don't want to say, like, I can't relate on that level, and I hope I never will, if that's okay to say.
I never do.
But it's nice to know. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but if if ever I was faced with that, I know that I have your example and someone that I could rely on to be my leaning post.
Well, I didn't wake up here.
No.
I don't want to be misleading that it was an easy process, regardless of the journey to when he passed. He has a young daughter who we helped to raise and are very close to, who looks identical to him.
Amazing.
Yeah, and there's always that niggling, things change, and what if there was a new treatment or a new science or a new, or maybe he ran into that person who just made things click for him. So you always kind of have that what if, because you always have hope. If you don't have hope, through the process, you always have hope, right? We never lost hope. I don't think there was ever a time that we ever lost hope. So I think that's the biggest challenge, is not having that ability to have hope, that, okay, well, we'll try this, or this person will come along, or so that's hard to swallow, I think, to not be able to have hope.
That is true. It's like there's the closure. It's like there is no open door. And you mentioned his daughter, your granddaughter.
Yeah.
And I almost forgot about that, but that's huge. That's like, his genes carry on, his line carries on, and she'll always, I'm sure, have a very special place in your life.
Absolutely. And she's just all of him, right?
Is that
like
right?
all of like his spunk, and she looks like him, and I know he loved her very, very much. And she's almost a reminder for me of how unwell he was.
Okay.
Because and that's the reality check for me, because there's nothing he wouldn't have done for that little girl. He loved that little girl.
Yes.
And the fact that he couldn't get well for her is that reminder for me when I'm getting in whatever space is, I mean, there was nothing else on this planet that he loved more, cared more about. And
But that wasn't the antidote either.
no.
Yeah.
And so that to me is a reminder of he was unwell.
Yeah.
And whatever that, whether it's, you know, mentally or biologically, he was born with whatever. Like I said, he's always struggled. I think that he was a very, very gentle human, and I think that the world was too hard for him. And there was now having the time to reflect when you get out of that crisis fix-it mode.
Absolutely.
You're able to sit back and really look at who he was, you know, and those incidents as a child that you go, oh, he's, you know, that's normal, 2 and 5, and you're really able to kind of pick them apart and go, oh yeah, that really upset him, or oh man, he had a hard time with that when I thought it was no big deal. And just really be able to reflect and go, it's hard, and biologically and mentally and physically, not everybody is cut out to be resilient. What makes somebody resilient, right?
It's a really good question. Yeah, it's a really good question, because I mean the line of work that you're in, you know, like you're sort of involved in such things all the time. And I think one of the questions I had was, do you find your line of work more challenging now, or do you find it like you have more empathy now? You know, how would you respond to that?
That's a good question. I don't find it more challenging. I feel I'm probably a lot more empathetic. I respect boundaries. I always did, but I really protect my space, my mental space where I'm at, because it's very easy, even before he passed, to get sucked in this field, right? Like burnout and self-care is a big deal. I think that there's always a line of self-disclosure when you're doing this work in order to get to be supportive. So I think I'm a little more protective of that, maybe because I don't want it to be about me, while still wanting to self-disclose. Like when I'm talking to a youth parent and saying like, man, I get it, right? Like,
Yeah.
and a lot of times they fire back, oh, you go home at 5 o'clock, or you don't get it. And I want to be like, like, you know, like I actually really do.
Yeah.
But I hold back on that. And sometimes, because I don't want it to be self-serving, you know, so sometimes I think that's a bit of a struggle, knowing what to disclose and what not to disclose, because that's their experience. And regardless of my ability to empathize or may have experienced similar things, it doesn't take away from their experience.
Well, that's actually a really good point you make, because, you know, it's like, you know how you have those people that like to one-up you, you know,
Right.
if it's like, oh, this happened to me. Oh, well, let me tell you what
Right.
happened to me,
Right.
you know? So in your situation, it's like families that you might deal with, you want to say, I do understand what you're going through, but you don't want, like you're saying, the attention to now be on you, and now they
Right.
have to make you feel better.
Right.
You know?
Because it's a bit of a showstopper, right? Hey, I lost a
Absolutely.
kid.
Absolutely.
And maybe they're struggling with something that they think is less than that, but might not necessarily be less than that. It's their experience, it's their trauma, it's their situation. So, and now, you know, are they going to feel comfortable being able to be open and say, like, I've had a really bad day, and think, oh, well, my bad day is nothing compared to hers. Don't want that. So I have to be very mindful and very careful as to what I disclose and how I disclose, to just let people have that experience.
Yeah, that's a very professional way to look at things, and how this is what I mean. Like you're such a strong individual, and the fact that you're able to do that, it says a lot about you, and that you're in the right profession, even though maybe sometimes it's a stressful profession.
It's not easy, and
Yeah.
I think that my personality, I'm pretty good about
Compartmentalizing.
Yes, I could never say that word. But I think that the reality of the situation is it's not black and white. It's not straightforward. And it comes back to me for acceptance. I mean, I talked about that at his service, and it's not necessarily strength that gets me through, but just the ability, and maybe it's resilience or whatever, are all wrapped up into one. But the one regret I do have is not really accepting him in this space because he didn't fit in. So because he didn't fit in, it was this constant push to change and to fit in, while this was his reality and this is how he was. And so obviously I wasn't going to endorse my child living a reckless lifestyle, which I knew was going to end badly or could end badly.
Yeah.
But part of not endorsing that was just saying, I don't accept you how you are. And that's kind of two things that are true together that don't really align, but they sit together. So I think that's one of the biggest things that I struggle with, that I didn't take more time. I was constantly, change this. You're not doing this right. You got to do this better. You got to.
Yeah.
And I don't know how I would have done it considering the circumstances, but I do wish that I had just been like, I'm just going to sit with you. I'm just going to, I had more opportunity to do that as opposed to just coming in with solutions and fix it all the time.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you bring that up, because I learn from your experience, and I also hope that maybe some that are watching this will learn from your experience, even from that very one thing that we have expectations of our kids, right? Oh, well, at least that they're gonna finish high school and go to college and get it. Like, we have all these expectations, and if that's not what they want, if that's not who they are, maybe that's okay. They'll find out who they are. As long as they're, not breaking any laws and not sleeping on the streets. I don't know.
Right.
Maybe that's okay too. I don't know. But it's like, well, not really,
They're
but that they're safe.
Yeah.
So from your experience, I'm, when my son talks to me, I'm very mindful of not judging, offering my motherly perspectives, but at the same time not flat out saying, nope, that's wrong, I disagree, because it's not my life.
Right.
He's an adult, so he has to make his own choices. So there's a fine line between offering guidance and kind of being a bulldozer.
Yeah, and I think that it's our job as a parent often to be solution focused and to fix it.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you're not fixing it as they're coming up, you're supposed to fix it, right? They need boots, they need this, they broke an arm, like, you fix it.
Yeah.
And then you morph into this different role where it's more accepting of their choices that you might not necessarily love, or even hearing it without saying you need to do A, B, by providing a solution. And that I've learned that I have younger children than him, and that's something that I'm really striving with them, that I cringe, they tell me things and I'm like, this makes no sense. However, I'm really trying not to be like, well, you need to A, B, and C. And it's a work in progress. It's not, I think the reality is that a lot of people struggle in this world. And
Absolutely.
for reasons that are nobody's fault. They just are. And I don't have all the answers around what makes you resilient or what makes you thrive or what makes you not thrive. But I just think that the acceptance of that would support a lot of people who do suffer after something like this happens. That just accept them for who they are. Accept them for the time that you have them for. Learn from what they brought you, right? I don't think it was all in vain.
No.
I think there was a point, and that's a work in progress as well. It doesn't have to be all negative and pain. Right?
That's actually really, really good advice. And I mean, the not negative and painful. It may take time.
Yes.
To kind of, you have to work through the negativity and pain, and it'll always be there, I think. But you're able to kind of take away some lessons and apply them to your younger kids, which is great. But it's like perspective, self-reflection, self-awareness, right? So I wanted to ask you a question because, I imagine that there probably were people in your life that had a really hard time, like approaching you and kind of, oh, I'm just going to leave her alone because, she doesn't want to be bugged right now. Or maybe they didn't know how to deal with their own emotions. Like, did you experience that? And what tips could you give to people who maybe know someone who's suffered a loss and they're avoiding the interaction to protect themselves, I guess you could say?
I'm so glad that you asked me that.
Okay.
I'm really glad that you asked me that because, death is weird, and death of a young person, of somebody's child, is weird. And people act weird about it, regardless of how you're approaching them or what your response is to them or your relationship. And so I've lost a couple of friends, by my choice, because of their reaction or non-reaction to me throughout this. And I just want to say, like, honestly, 98% of the people in my life, this does not apply to. But it's interesting what comes out, in people that you think you have relationships with when something like this happens. And a very common response I had from several people was that just kind of disappeared. When confronted, hello, like, what's up, was, well, you have lots of people, so I figured you'd just reach out when you were ready. Or you looked really well supported, so I didn't think that you needed me to text. Which at first it was just like, I don't understand. Because we all have these relationships in life, and they're all different, right? Like, everybody brings something to your life. Like, when you have a kid and they sleep over at someone's house and they're great, and they come home and they act completely different with you, because we all have these different personalities, right? You're a sister, you're a mom, you're a wife, you're a friend, and we all play these different roles. So I have a very clear understanding, but I guess not everybody does. And so I was very confused as to, what does my relationship with you and our friendship have to do with the fact that I have a gaggle of siblings, right? Or I have a mom who supports me, or because our relationship is our relationship. I've come to realize, I think that it was more about them, right? I think that he passed away from substance abuse, right? He had a hard last couple of years. He had mental health issues. These are all of the buzzwords of difficult things to talk about. So then, I'm not necessarily saying I understand it, but that was kind of the response as, well, you didn't text me and I wanted to give you space and you have a lot of support. And I was really frank with those people, and I just said, like, you dropped the ball.
Yeah.
And is in this position, I've lost a kid. And I will say, I'll get back to it, but I just want to say that every single person who messaged me on every single forum after he passed away, not immediately, but I went through systematically and I responded to every single one of them.
Wow.
Over a period of time and on my space. And the majority of the messages were, I just wanted you to know that we were impacted and thinking about you. You don't need to respond. And there were some people who periodically would just say, just thinking about you, just wanted to say hi, just checking in. Don't expect anything back, not sure what space you're in, just wanted to put it out there. Which was so normal to me, right? Which and even throughout, things get quiet in the first couple of weeks after something happens, and for months and months, people would just, hey, haven't talked to you, just wanted to check in. So to put the onus on the grieving party to reach out and say, what do you need? I that doesn't really make sense to me. even as an interpersonal relationship perspective, because relationships are kind of give and take, right? So to sit back and say, well, just call me when you're in a better space, or call me if you need anything.
Yeah.
It just didn't really make sense to me, which is fine. And I basically ended those conversations with, if this happens to anybody else in your life, or anyone else in your life is having a loss, don't suck, because this sucks. Show up, send a message. We live in an age where there's just no excuse to send a message. It's so easy now. Even if you're awkward, right? Confront whatever it is that's making you feel awkward. And give the person the opportunity to at least say what they need or what they don't need, instead of making the assumption because it's based on your discomfort to stay away. Don't put it on that you're doing me a favor by staying away when it's about you.
Yeah, and that is exactly what I was hoping that you would share, kind of like, okay, so for sure, death, illness, different traumas that people experience, you may have a hard time dealing with it yourself, but maybe that's how you open the conversation.
Yeah.
Say, I'm having a real hard time. I don't know what to say. But I just want you to know that I'm here. I'm thinking about you, and
And lots of people did that.
yes,
I don't know what to say. I don't know what to
98%
say.
of the yes,
Yeah. And the other buzzword I left out is I've lost a kid. It's everybody's worst nightmare.
everyone's.
So you almost have to confront that a little bit when you open up the door to have a conversation with me about my grief, because it's a horror, and you don't want to. People say I can't imagine, because you can't, and I don't want you to.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you can't still show up, or you
Yeah.
can't send a message, or you can't still be supportive, because I don't want you to know what I'm going through.
Yeah.
Because I actually care about you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah, it was interesting to see what people reacted what way. But it was such a small number, and I kind of use it as an opportunity to say, like, listen, just moving forward, anybody in your life, please show up, no matter the discomfort, no matter how difficult. Just don't do this again, and it's okay.
And that's exactly what I wanted to know from you, because if someone was in your position or knows someone in your position, probably the worst thing you can do is ignore them. So
Yeah.
I think
Don't do that.
going forward, don't do that.
Don't do that.
Now, another question. You've shared that your son suffered from addiction, and the thing is, though, that's not ultimately what led to him losing his life. I know you've kind of talked about there's addiction, and then there's what leads to addiction, and so forth. Can you share about like your insights about what you've learned about addiction and the precursors to addiction, and then and we already talked about whether it's helped you in your profession or not, but more so like you don't necessarily want to be an advocate of the fight against opioid,
Right.
because you don't feel like that's the reason why it happened. So how do you navigate that now? So
That's difficult, because there is an epidemic, a pandemic, way worse than COVID. Not going to go down that rabbit hole, but for many, for a long time, there's been this opioid epidemic that is ravaging our 18 to 29-year-olds throughout this country, and it hasn't been addressed because of what is attached to addiction, right? That it's a choice that you are, you've made a decision to live that type of lifestyle, and that's what comes with it. And obviously there's autonomy and agency and choices. However, I think this is different. In our case, I've had people reach out to me to ask me to talk about opioid epidemic, and my son overdosed on fentanyl. And so I've been reluctant to do that, and I just thought maybe it wasn't the time. And I've been processing and trying to really dig deep as to like, why don't I want to do that? And I think to try and articulate it the best way is that I think that was the the end result, but it wasn't the actual problem. He died from a fentanyl overdose, but it was kind of at the end of a road of an innate problem of just not feeling like he fit in here, and he was always searching for something to make him feel better from a very young age. It didn't matter what it was, what was going on. It was always this elusive search for something to make him feel better. Obviously, we didn't know this at the time, but when you look back, you can see that he was just never ever comfortable. And opioids make you feel better. So when you look at it from that perspective, you know, why wouldn't you gravitate towards something that actually finally, after a long search, makes you feel better? So it sounds kind of counterintuitive that yes, you know, we have this epidemic and yes, we have this problem. But when I just speak to my situation specifically with my kid, I think that he was just trying to feel better, whatever that looks like. Again, not thriving in this space with the expectations of this life, of whatever his mental makeup was, his diagnosis. He didn't feel good. And I think within some on the spectrum, we all have some level of not feeling good. And who doesn't want to make that go away, right? You're giving birth to a baby, you have an epidural.
Yeah.
Right? Right? You've had a rough day. I like wine.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah. But it's all about that, again, capacity to balance, right? That capacity to cope, that capacity, that innate resilience to be able to say, like, so this sucks, and I'm going to have a glass of red wine, and then I'm going to get back in the saddle again tomorrow. And because I've got those kind of internal resources. And so I think my point is, I think that's kind of my platform, is those internal resources. If you don't have them, how do we support people to get them or to build them without it just being a rehab or addiction, or you're an addict, or, you know, you're committing crimes to support your drug habit, because then the drugs are about feeling better. So I guess that is my platform.
Yeah, and it's, you know, like, it's a personal thing for you, because it's like you you work in that profession and you want to help, but you're like, I also don't want to be, you know, untrue to myself,
right,
and my son and what I really believe. So, you know, I guess in terms of, you know, talking about resiliency and so forth, do you have any advice for women, and not necessarily about dealing with what you've dealt with, because goodness knows I hope that no one has to deal with that, but, you know, do you have, like, kind of go-to, besides red wine, go-to coping mechanisms? Not really, let's call a spade, but right. Do you have anything kind of that you do on a daily basis that helps you to be strong, because you are strong and you are very resilient? So what's been your secret sauce for that?
Well, on a daily basis,
yes.
I have to tell you, I come from a gaggle of humans.
Yes.
So on a daily basis, we're going to start with the head gaggle, which is my mother, who yes. we interact more than a daily basis. But all kidding aside, I think it's that community. It's that there was, what's the word I'm looking for? Unequivocal or unconditional support, right? At his worst, at his lowest. There was zero judgment. It was just, I need you to, you know, at one point he was living with my mother, and I moved into my mother's house for a bit, and then my mother moved out of town, so he was there, you know, and then we thought it would be a good idea to get him out of the region, so he was living with my mother. He lived with his dad's mother at a point. My sister was also instrumental in, you know, certain things throughout the journey. I'm probably forgetting people, but
right, no,
it was just that it didn't matter, like, hey, he's A, B, and C, or this has happened. It was like, all right, we got it, so
That's so nice.
that for me, I think would be the foundation of it, coming from resilience. I mean, it's probably generational, surrounded by lots of strong women. I think, I don't know, it's a tough one when I think about it.
Can I ask that okay, so you come from a strong group of females, like sisters,
Correct.
and aunts, your mom, daughters,
Yeah.
so that I think is really sorely lacking.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, simply don't have that. So it's if you do have it, one, don't take it for granted. Like, consider yourself lucky. But if let's say you don't have blood relatives, social support network, because it's so important in times of trauma, when you're not in trauma, pursue it.
Yeah.
Look for opportunities to connect with people.
Absolutely. I'm also very lucky that I have lots of friends. As you get older, your friends start to, just a natural progression of life,
Yeah.
right? Your friend
Yeah.
group gets smaller. And I've been lucky enough to have this really diverse group of friends who have been around for years.
That's nice.
From all different kind of walks. You and I were the restaurant and school. And I still have friends from the restaurant who I consider very good friends. And just this eclectic group of women, mainly, that I have really good, long-standing relationships who were just as important to me throughout the process because they were along for the journey as well.
Yeah.
So I said this to somebody the other day about giving back. One of the things we talk about is when you're having a hard time, giving back to somebody or something, or doing something other than being in your trauma or being in your space is actually a tool, like an intervention for your own stuff. It's distracting, takes your mind off of what you're going through, and gives you a bit of perspective into, there's someone always has it hard, right?
Yes,
Someone's always going through
absolutely.
something as well. And I think if you get stuck in your own head too long, too much, you lose that perspective, and it's not healthy. And so I think it was important for me also to be doing that, right, within whatever capacity it was, but doing something for somebody else, not just my own kids or what you have to do for life, but just doing something for somebody else gives you a nice perspective around, all right, there's other things outside of me, right?
I love that. So social support and giving back. And I think kind of how you described it is it's kind of like the difference between self-pity and self-compassion. So if you're, have self-pity, and hey, listen, it's okay to have self-pity once in a while. That's why just
Absolutely.
throw the sheet over your head for the night
Yeah.
and call it a day. But having self-compassion implies taking action to fix things, to show acts of kindness, to show, and
Right.
towards yourself, instead of being self-absorbed.
Absolutely.
With feeling pity. And like I said, we all feel, are allowed to feel sorry for ourselves for a short period of time, but then give back, look for connections, and it'll help bring you out of it.
Absolutely. And just one other thing I was thinking about too, that when I think about the experience with friends and giving back, we're this whole person. Like, I'm a mom, I'm a sister, I'm this, and I'm that.
Yes.
And when those other two people didn't think that I had kind of anything else to either give back to them or to talk about, it was okay to go to dinner and laugh and talk about what's going on in your life, because that is also helpful to me. I don't need you just so that I can go, woe is me, and go to dinner and just talk about how bad it is for me. You showing up and us going out to dinner and just laughing about whatever nonsense is going on in your life is also a way of kind of giving back, me listening to you and being able to get out of my own crap for a second, right? So that's just
Excellent.
another kind of reason to show up
Okay.
That it's not disrespectful to call your friend and laugh and say like, oh my God, I got rear-ended by a 90-year-old and, and make me laugh.
I don't know why I'm laughing. That shouldn't be funny.
But just tell me about some weird situation that's happened to you that takes me out of my head, that makes me laugh. And now I've also given back by listening to you. It's just another reason to show up.
That's a really good point to make too, so that you're giving someone else the freedom of having a healthy distraction from whatever might be depressing.
People were afraid to laugh with me.
Yeah, I can imagine.
They were afraid to, like, oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have laughed, or it's not funny, or you'll say like, oh, it's really funny, and they'll go, oh no, I shouldn't.
Yeah.
It was just like, it is funny. Yeah. Actually, I still have a sense of humor, and it's okay to laugh.
It's okay to laugh. And he would have laughed.
Oh my goodness.
So it's
he was so funny, and I still crack up at things that he said and done now. Like, just out of nowhere, I'll be driving and be like, wow, I forgot he did that. Oh. Yes, he was quite funny, and I do miss that, but I've got lots to reflect on and laugh. It wasn't all bad. No.
And it'll be interesting to see how his daughter grows up if she ends up with his sense of humor and all.
She's
all
a
of
firecracker.
The things
Already. Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Well, I think that's awesome. I really appreciate all of your time. I'm not gonna keep you too much longer. I guess one last question was, do you have like a famous quote or words you live by, or a mantra that you'd like to share? And if you don't, that's okay, because you could probably make one up, and we would live by your words.
It's funny that you say that, because my younger children are always rolling their eyes, and I'll say something and they'll say, you should tweet that. You should tweet that. And I'll say it and I'll be like, oh, that was good. Should I tweet that? And they're like, settle down.
Something about consent.
I do love to talk about consent. That's another video. I can't think of one off the top of my head, and I know that there's lots, and I'm going to get in the car and be like, damn.
That's okay.
But honestly, I think that my motto would just be kind of like, it's that level of acceptance. I think things just are much easier to bear and to cope and to live through and to thrive and to survive, and when you just have that real deep kind of visceral acceptance. Right? This sucks, and I'm gonna be okay. Right? And that for me, I think, has been my mantra since he passed away. A lot of times before he passed away, it was a lot of acceptance that, like, I don't like where he's at, and it's not safe, and I can't change my boundary on it. So I think that acceptance is really key in the journey of healing. That there's a lot of things we don't like, and we're still okay.
That's huge. That's actually huge. Having that kind of acceptance, and like not watering down. Like, no. It sucks. This sucks.
It sucks.
But I have to accept it.
Right.
And I'm gonna be okay.
Absolutely.
And you are okay. You're a strong, what do you call it? A leading post. You're one of my strongest friends, and I love strong females.
Well,
we need strong
right
females.
back at you, friend. Okay, we came together, we bumbled together, and we've had some experiences and life traumas, and we're still friends.
We're still friends.
We are,
and hopefully far into the future.
Yep.
Lots of laughter and love to come.
Yes. Thank you.
And well, thank you. I was very, very reluctant to ask Liz to talk about this in this sort of resiliency series, but I think enough time has passed, and not that it's for me to say enough time has passed, but for her, she felt that enough time had passed, and she was okay to talk about it, and hopefully to give some insight and tips to the viewers, because this is not something that It's like we said, everyone's probably biggest fear. Really, what worse thing could there be? And knowing someone who's been through it can really help give some strength and tips to others. So
Yeah, and I just want to say I don't want to minimize anybody's opioid experience. I just speak about mine and my kind of perspective on his journey that ended with opioids. I think there's probably 1,000 gazillion different stories as to how people get there and their impact. So I wouldn't want to minimize the impact of fentanyl or of the opioid or of the drug of choice. I just had some time to reflect on our personal journey of how we got there and what influenced where it went. But there's so many intersections of how we get there. So that's for people to kind of work through themselves. The outcome and the impact of losing a loved one, I think, is has similar themes. Just my kind of perspective on opioids, I think, is more mine, but it might be relatable to other people
but
as
I
well.
think that's fair to say, because if you're sort of on the outside, you might lump everything into one easy to digest package.
Right.
When we're dealing with individuals and families and histories and that, and you're one piece of that, and this is your story. So
Right.
I appreciate you saying that. So
Yeah, I just don't want to minimize anybody else's experience and thoughts.
no.
And I'm hoping that you get some feedback, because
Yes.
that's helpful to me as well, to hear other people's perspective.
Absolutely, and I hope people will comment below. And if you feel you might need to speak with Liz, maybe she can help you. I hear I'm offering her services. If people wanted to connect with you, like,
Yeah,
is there a way to
absolutely.
connect with you? Like,
Absolutely.
are you on LinkedIn or
Yep, I am.
LinkedIn?
Actually, yeah.
Elizabeth Evans or Liz?
Elizabeth
Evans.
apparently.
Yes. Okay. So if you want to connect with her and ask questions, maybe about such a sensitive topic, then she's willing to give back that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
I'd love to hear from anyone.
All right. Okay. So on that note, thank you again.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah, you're a trooper, an awesome woman. I think I'm gonna owe her a bottle of red wine after this.
Gonna need it.
Yeah. Okay. So on that note, be positive. See you again.